Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship. Thank you so much for joining us today. This week, we have a really exciting episode with one of actually my favorite new finds in terms of children's books. But before I introduce our guest today, I'm going to talk a little bit about our wonderful author that we're going to have on the show today. So please welcome Nicole, who is the author of Penny Panda and the Gift of Possibility. And she also has a new upcoming book called Penny Panda and the Emotion Ninjas. These are a series of charming children's books that explore the adventures of a character named Izzy as she learns to navigate her emotions through the help of her trusty companion, Penny Panda. The book touches on important themes such as emotional intelligence, self-confidence, and the power of friendship. They focus on taking complicated and life-changing social emotional topics and breaking them down into bite-sized, easy-to-understand stories. Each book provides a practical life skill or tool that children can use in their everyday lives to increase self-awareness, practice self-management, and emotional regulation, encourage responsible decision-making, and build their social awareness and relationship skills. Nicole was inspired to write about Penny Panda through her own experience as a parent in hopes of helping her two daughters develop their social emotional intelligence. So please welcome to the show, Nicole. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Nikki, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have to say that I absolutely fell in love with your book, and it's been interesting even reading it to my son, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what inspired you to become a children's book author.
Sure. So like you mentioned, my name is Nicole Oke, and I live in Boise, Idaho. I am a mother of two beautiful girls, Izzy, who is 8, and she is kind of the basis for the main character in the books, and then Madeline, who is 3. My day job is actually a training specialist at the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho, working in wildland fire. So going from that to becoming a children's book author was kind of an interesting adventure.
A big change, yeah.
Yes, for sure. And it all started probably about 5-6 years ago. I really delved into self-improvement and trying to kind of deal with my own big emotions. And I wanted to learn more about emotional intelligence and all the social emotional learning concepts that were out there. And the more that I learned, the more I kind of kept just thinking, I wish I had known this when I was younger. Mm-hmm. Like, I wish I had someone had taught me these skills when I was in elementary school. And I think junior high and high school would have been so much easier if I had had these skill sets. And so I kept thinking to myself, gosh, I want to embrace these concepts and give them to my kids. Mm-hmm. So I went searching for children's books. And there's a lot out there about emotions, but so many of them kind of end at emotions are good. And I wanted like that next step. I wanted, right. Yes, it's good to validate our emotions, but then what do you do with them?
Right.
And so when I couldn't find what I was looking for my kids, I started thinking, well, what if I wrote one? And I'd always kind of wanted to write a book for my daughter. And I thought, well, this is something that would be cool for her, but could help so many kids and so many parents.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the Penny Panda came from.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. And I do love the title, Penny Panda and the Gift of Possibility, because I think it kind of, after you read the book, you understand, oh yeah, there's just so many different types of possibilities, right, in terms of solutions or outcomes. And I know your book has received a lot of positive feedback. Can you give our listeners just a brief overview about the book itself?
Yeah, of course. So Penny Panda and the Gift of Possibility takes place on Christmas morning when a little girl named Izzy gets a very special stuffed panda. In the beginning, she's kind of disappointed because she's like, why, of all the things, did Santa bring me a stuffed panda? And her parents explain that it's a penny for her thoughts and that anytime she has like big feelings or emotions, she can go talk to Penny. So as the morning goes on, Izzy kind of starts to notice that her baby sister Maddie is getting more presents than her. And as a lot of kids do, and we all do as humans, she kind of jumps to a conclusion. And she thinks that this means her parents must love Maddie more. And so she decides, well, I'll go take Penny into my room and I'll talk to Penny because mom and dad say that's what she's there for. So Penny magically comes to life. Izzy explains what's going on. Penny she walks through and validates her emotions, talks about how, most kids in that situation would probably feel the same way. And they also kind of talk about how not only that, but adults would feel the same way. And to me, it was very important in the book to start with validating those emotions. Mm-hmm. And then they go on, and Penny says, I have this really fun game that I like to play anytime I think that something could be true, but maybe it's not. And so she introduces the possibility game. And in that game, what they do is they come up with different possibilities for why that may happen. So in the book, it's why did Maddie get more presents? Mm-hmm. So Izzy and Penny, they come up with 3 very practical reasons why maybe Maddie got more presents, such as her parents spent the same amount of money, so that was fair. Maddie's a baby. She doesn't have as many toys, so she got a few extra. And then I always like to throw in a fun one. And in this book, it's that when Santa dropped Penny off, one of the elves decided that he loved Izzy's present so much, he stole one and put it in his pocket and ran away with it. Yeah. And I think, to me, adding that fun element in there not just helps the story to be more fun, but I want kids to do that too, because the more possibilities we can think of, even if they're not likely, the more it opens our minds to think about things differently and to really kind of question what our assumptions are.
Right.
And that's kind of the premise of that first book.
That's amazing. And I do love that because I think, like you said, it also invokes some critical thinking, right? Like the why aspect of the emotion. And I think, with my son Drayson, it's always been a coping strategy. Okay, if you feel frustrated, what are you going to do? Deep breathe, those types of things. But we're not really identifying the why, like you mentioned, behind the emotion or explaining, why you might feel that way and what the solutions to that could be other than just, count to 10 and take 5 deep breaths, So, and exactly. I know you had mentioned that the inspiration behind your book were your daughters. How has this been, conveying this storyline with your girls? Because I think that's truly an extraordinary thing that you've taken upon yourself to do just to help your own children. But now, you're helping other parents and families with the messaging in this book.
It has been, if I'm completely honest, it has been wonderful and also a little frustrating at times because it's like, as a parent, I watch them and they start to grasp the concept, and it took a while. If I'm honest, at first I was kind of like, this isn't working. Like the first month or so that I was like, well, let's think of the new possibilities. Let's play the possibility game. But then after about a month, it really kind of sunk in, and my kids started using it more and more, and even my husband started using it more and more. And then that was so fun to watch. But then when it took a turn was when I had a little of emotional upheaval at one point, and I remember them saying, okay, Mom, now what are the other possibilities?
Right.
And I was like, okay, I love that you're using this. This is awesome. This is what I want. But now you're calling me out on my own emotional stuff. And so it's like, wonderful. But then at the same time, it's like, oh man, now they're
now
here for me, which is great.
Well, you're right. But still, it's kind of like, I think we have several moments like that in parenting. It's the, you go back to the do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. But then they come back and they put it in your face and you're like, oh, okay, well, I was not expecting that, So,
exactly.
But that's good because it
Yeah.
also means that you know that they're retaining, what you've been trying to teach them and to help them grow, and to have a
Oh,
different
yeah.
perspective. Do you find that it helps de-escalate some of or maybe the overthinking? Because I know sometimes when we enter that state of emotion, and even though Drayson doesn't speak a lot, I always worry that he's now reeling in that emotion, that he's stewing in that emotion and he's not coming out of it. Do you find that it's helped, to de-escalate some of that?
I do. And I think it helps in a few ways. I think it encourages a little more communication. So especially when we start playing the game with our children and we start asking them what the other possibilities are, when they kind of get used to that, then they get used to us talking about the feelings. Right. They get used to us talking about what's going on. They get used to us kind of thinking through those different possibilities. And I've found that my daughter now will just kind of do it on her own. Mm-hmm. Like she'll say something and then she'll be like, well, it's also possible that this or that. And I think it's good because it opens up communication between us as parents and our kids, because now when they say, oh, well, it's possible X, Y, and Z, I get an insight into what my daughter's thinking and how she's perceiving what's happening around her. That's and then, great. Because I think, so often we assume, right, that our kids are thinking like we're thinking and that they're taking away the same things we are, but that's not always true. And so when they tell me, if she comes to me and she says, well, I think that, you love Maddie more because of X, Y, and Z, then we can talk through that and we can really communicate what's happening. And one of the biggest struggles lately has been when things are fair or not fair.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's going to be a future book. But talking through that...
You're all next up.
Talking, right? Exactly. Fairness. We're going to talk about fairness.
Yeah.
But just being able to talk through it with her, it's like we now have a more open dialogue. So we can talk about our feelings. It's okay. It's normalized. I get to understand where she's coming from. She can understand where I'm coming from. I just think it's a great tool.
It's such a great foundation that you're laying down too, especially because Drayson is preteen now. So excited about that. And I'm sure you'll have plenty of other books to write about that when that time comes for you.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that that's such a great foundation because one of the main themes of your book is emotional literacy. And, I think it's so important that we teach our children those things. But I think you bring up a really good point that you just mentioned. Correct me if I'm wrong, but do you believe that it's important that you teach your children about these emotions and how to identify them, because it does open up that communication, like you were saying?
Yes, completely. It opens up the communication. It makes it okay for them to talk about what they're feeling, and it makes it okay to express it and then to have a conversation around it. I think often we kind of get taught to suppress our feelings.
Yes.
And that was kind of my issue with some of the books too, is, feelings are good. They are, but then let's take that next step and say, okay, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling sad, but why? And let's talk about that and then kind of figure out, is it our thinking? Is it, where is it actually coming from? And what kind of control do we have over it? Because there are times, when someone passes or things happen that we can't control. And those are it's completely valid to just sit in those emotions. Right. But there's other times where it's our thinking that is creating the situation, and we can control that and we can change that. And so that's where I think this tool really comes in, is to help kids see through these different possibilities that maybe what we're thinking isn't always right, and that we should be curious about that and really want to discover, like, why am I feeling this way? What's underneath it? And is it really true or not? Because often it's not.
No, or the overthinking comes into play. And like you said, I think a lot of emotional imbalance between families or kids or parents is because that line of communication isn't really fully open. I always think that maybe Drayson's thinking one thing, and then when I figure it out, I realize he's thinking something else that I didn't even take into consideration. It's like you can't be the mind reader,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So how can parents and educators use your book to facilitate conversations about emotions with children?
So I think the first book is really great, The Gift of Possibility, because it comes with the possibility game. So it's
Yes.
a game that you can just start playing with your kids. And my biggest piece of advice for all parents, anytime that you start incorporating a new social emotional tool, is to do it with the easy stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
So, use
Start
it when
simple.
it's something, yeah, start simple. When, they're upset about something little like not getting to read the book they want, or not having enough screen time, like those things to me are a little bit easier to kind of start playing the games then, or to, when I use it a lot with my daughter when a friend says something upsetting,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well, they didn't want to play with me today. Okay, well, let's talk through the different possibilities why. Because
Right.
often she assumes, well, they don't want to play with me, so they don't like me. Well, that's
Right.
one possibility. It's possible that maybe they don't like you, but is it possible that maybe they want to play by themselves? And then encourage them to kind of come up with their own possibilities. And then work into those bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even if you can, play it when it's fun. Or like like to use books and television. So you're watching a show or reading a book, and the main character struggles with something or makes an
Mm-hmm.
assumption about something. Ask your kids, what else is possible? Like, this is what
Right.
they're thinking, but we know more, so what else is possible? Because then it gets them thinking about it when they're semi-regulated, when they're in a
Yes.
relaxed
More
state, when they
calm.
can really,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when they can comprehend it. Because when we get emotionally hijacked, it's really hard to get into that state of logic and thinking differently. So the
Mm-hmm.
more you can practice it on the easy stuff, the easier it'll be when the hard stuff happens.
Right. Right. And I think you're creating a really good platform for the open-mindedness of things to happen, because sometimes I think we get very siloed in, especially in a heightened state of emotion, right? It's easy just to silo into, that state of frustration and insecurity maybe, but then showing, like the example you gave with her daughter, like, well, what else, could be the possibility of why, you know, little Susie didn't want to play. And I think
Right.
it's also allowing for more of that aspect to be open-minded, because I think sometimes that can be really difficult, especially when you're in a heightened state of emotion. Like you said, I mean, you kind of, how you ate your own words when
For
you're,
sure.
how you ate
Right?
your own words when they're like, well, what could be the possibility? And you're like, I don't want to talk about this right now.
Right?
You know?
Exactly.
So,
Well, and the other, oh, yeah,
go ahead. No, you're fine. Go
sorry.
ahead. No.
I was going to see the other thing that I like to do with this too is when I have situations that come up that I deal with, and then I realize even later that I should have played the possibility game. Sometimes I'll come home and casually mention that to my family too. And just another way to kind of re-emphasize the point. I'll be like, oh my gosh, I was at work today, and this person, like, they hung up on me. And
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, oh, they're so mad at me. And I was like, I was, upset about it. I was worrying about it. And then come to find out that they just had another phone ringing, and they called back later. They apologized. And so if I had played that possibility game, man, I could have saved myself a lot of suffering, right? If I had just been like,
Yeah.
maybe they're busy or maybe they got interrupted. And so that kind of also gets kids to see a few things. One, that we're using it, and two, that we're human. Two,
Mm-hmm.
that we sometimes get our emotions get away from us. And I think all of that is really important for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets you out of that, like I said, it gets you out of that headspace. It gets you out of the headspace of what you're actually thinking, and then you realize that there's other factors around you that are influential, or they're being influenced by something else. Like you said, the other phone was ringing and you didn't know that, but now that you know that, you're like, oh, that was okay. That was, and then you realize sometimes the emotions, like, that was totally unnecessary that I put myself through that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, well, can you share any kind of behind the scenes stories? I know we've talked a little bit about some of them, but have you heard from other families or people that have read your book that highlight the impact of your book to their young readers?
Well, I have one story. The first one that comes to mind actually didn't influence a young reader. He influenced his wife.
Oh,
It was a
okay.
coworker of mine. Yeah, and he had bought the book, and he bought the book to support me because his son is older. He's like 16 or 17, and he was reading the book, and then he's like, "I just want you to know, I've started doing it with my wife, and she started doing it with me, and now we're playing the possibility game all the time." And I was like, "Oh." It was just so heartwarming to hear
Yeah.
that. And I think it just goes to show that the concept, while I tried to make it fun for kids, like we
Yeah.
can all use it.
Oh, yeah. Fun for
And
all
so,
ages, for sure.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Well, I greatly appreciate your time and your energy coming on the show today, Nicole. For those of you guys listening in, I will post the link for Nicole's book. It's available on Amazon. Is that correct, Nicole?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So,
And most anywhere books are sold.
oh, that's wonderful. Okay, great. So what I'll do, though, for our listeners today is I'm going to go ahead and post all of your information in the show notes as well. And you do have a new and upcoming book coming out in, is it September?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So it'll be the second book,
Okay.
Penny Panda and the Emotion Ninjas.
Oh, boy.
And it will be out, yes, in September. It will be available for pre-order on Kickstarter at the end of July and early August. So that's also an option if you want to get it before it hits the presses. And if you liked Inside Out 2, you will love the Emotion Ninjas. It's a very similar idea of kind of being able to separate ourselves from our emotions and understanding why they're there and how to use them.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So for those of you listening in, please make a note to check out her new upcoming book as well as her current book. And I just love Penny Panda. I can't wait to get my own Penny Panda here soon, maybe. So,
right?
Yeah, and the title is so cute. The illustrations are cute. For those of you watching, you can see the book, but it's such a cute little illustrated book. I just love it. For those of you listening in, it's got this really cute, fun little cover on it, and Penny Panda just looks like she's huggable and squeezable, and I just love that because we can all use a little bit of love and comfort in our lives at all times, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
for sure.
Thanks again so much for coming on the show today, Nicole. I greatly appreciate you. I look forward to seeing more of your upcoming work. And this concludes our episode for today. So if you have questions, comments, or even a show topic, please email me at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you haven't already. And please check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. If you like what you're hearing, please spread the word to others and feel free to give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform of choice. And that concludes our episode for today. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, keep working on your puzzle. And remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.